Hello everyone, so here we are with the HTC One, otherwise known as the M8, the follow-on to the HTC One. Now, as many of you will know, the HTC One last year was voted T3 Magazine's Phone of the Year, and I would certainly agree with that. So, we're going to go through a full unboxing, a complete deep dive of all of the key features in one single video. These videos tend to take around 30 to 35 minutes, and ultimately you will get to see every single bit of the device and our first impressions as well. We'll be following up over the next week with a full review as well as a deep dive on all of the really small intricate features that we're being given here with the HTC One M8. Let's start. First of all, I noticed that they've kind of skewed the usual kind of boxy shape that we get with a lot of these smartphones. Instead of obviously quite a small thin box, we've got something a little bit more square, which I think is quite nice. So let's remove the top, and straight away there is our handset. Let's just see if we can get that out. Right, to tip it. Nope. Let's tip the box. Ooh. Okay, yeah, you can certainly feel the extra weight on this device compared to the HTC One from last year, the 2013 model. But not unpleasant, I wouldn't say. So, let's see what else we have in the box here. It's the usual assortment. Oh, okay. Looks like we get a free cover. Let's take all these little bits and pieces out first and we'll just see. Let's get this box out of the way. Okay then. So, there's our device, and then we've got all manner of extra stuff. So, we'll leave the device to one side for a moment. Let's just get these bits out here. Or shall I say tear into them. So, we have what by now is known to many, many people, the HTC One charger. We have what appears to be a set of headphones as well. Yep, set of headphones, which are actually quite nice. They sort of look like Beats Audio ones, if you can just see that. Very similar to design to the Beats Audio in earbuds from last year. The obligatory micro USB cable, because, you know, we all don't have millions and millions of those lying around. But this interests me. It would appear to be a free case. It is a free case. Now, that's an interesting thing in itself. How nice to get a nice little flexi grip cover with it. Fantastic. But anyway, we don't really care about all these things we get in the box, do we? What we really care about is the HTC One itself. So, next up, let's take a look at the HTC One's design and let's see what we think. Okay, so let's have a look at the HTC One itself. It's obviously come in a small little piece of sort of plastic there just to keep the thing from getting scratched and make sure it's all nice and shiny. Ta-da! There we go. Now, the first instant thing that I notice is these tapered edges are far superior to the previous HTC One. That actually has a really nice feel in the hand. I quite liked the first, the HTC One from last year, but the edges could feel a little bit kind of grating on these parts of your hand here. This has a very good in the hand feel. It feels very similar to the Galaxy S4 with its tapered edges. Very, very nice. Now, the most important task, let me see if we can do this, is the finger balance. Now, if we get this device near enough in its centre, we should be able to find the pivot point. There we are. So what we can see here, this is actually a couple of inches off the ground, but that is your kind of balance point on this device. And it's actually very nicely balanced. If you notice, I'm able to lift it up and down, and it isn't really moving around too much. If I try that on the side of my finger, should be able to get a similar kind of result from it. Again, a little bit more wobbly, but that is pretty well balanced, I would say. The original HTC One always felt like it had just a slight amount of kind of top heaviness on it, so it was sometimes kind of tip more. That does feel nice. So just going round the device, as it were, let's just pop that down on the table. One of the key things that we obviously have on the HTC range of devices is the boom sound, which is denoted by these two speakers. On the original HTC One, it gave incredible sound. We will be checking to see how well that stacks up on the new device. What we also have on the front is the front-facing selfie camera, as I think we can now well and truly dub front-facing cameras. It is a 5 megapixel shooter, which is a bit of an interesting one, really. Traditionally, we normally would have maybe 2 or 3 megapixels or less. Here we have a 5 megapixel normal style shooter, so not ultra pixels, just 5 megapixel. It's a standard kind of camera. The display is now a 5-inch display, and it's pretty much edge to edge. You can see a small amount of bordering here, but not a huge amount. On the bottom, this is where our standard kind of jacks are concerned. We have our mini USB, or micro USB, whichever way you want to call it, and a headphone jack. On the top, we have a power button, and that's about our lot. Taking a look at the front of the HTC One M8, one of the key things that we can obviously notice is the speaker grille, very similar to the HTC One from last year. It is boom sound, which means it's got lots of front-facing sound, unlike most mobile phones and smartphones which have their speakers either on the bottom or the back, which ultimately means that the sound isn't really facing you. In the HTC One from last year, it was most definitely a standout feature. Interestingly, the front-facing camera is now a 5 megapixel shooter, which is interesting because effectively using ultra pixels for the back cameras, that really only tops out at the equivalent of around 4 megapixel. So in theory, you will get a slightly bigger quality of image, such a larger image from the front-facing camera than you will from the back, although evidently the front-facing camera is not going to give you as good a quality of image, less light being able to come in. Now, on the bottom we have our standard USB jack and the headphone jack on there, so charging and audio. On the top is our power button, and on the sides we have 2 trapdoors which are used for the SIM and for the MicroSD card. Excellent thing here, 32 gig is your storage, but you can expand it through MicroSD, thankfully. Nothing worse than having a top-end smartphone that's brilliant for media and not being able to actually get all of your media you want to play onto it. Now, on the back, things haven't really changed a right lot from the HTC One 2013. The major changes really are dual cameras and the dual LED flash, which I don't believe dual LED flash was on the previous HTC One. Might have to double check that actually. And also we've got some noise cancelling microphone point there, I believe, as well. Now, the really interesting thing with the camera array they've gone for on the HTC One M8 is this dual camera setup. Now, we will be testing this in more detail and giving you some footage from that as well. But ultimately, the way this works is this is your primary camera here, and this takes your actual photograph. But this top camera is actually measuring the depth of the image as it's being taken. So what you can then do is change the focus on the camera after you've taken the picture. So effectively you can take the picture, take your picture, a nice scene, maybe 2 people stood next to each other or 1 person stood slightly into the background. And then afterwards you can kind of recompose the shot by making the foreground blurry and the background sharp and vice versa. And all of that is achieved by this ability to have depth information generated from this second camera. This could well be a watershed moment in smartphone camera design. A very clever idea and something that's very similar to a technology called Litro, which was kind of come up with a few years ago. Very interesting to see how this kind of works out. Now, the HTC logo, it's slightly bumpy. It kind of is sort of embossed into this metal. And it feels a little rough, but it's not unpleasant. Let's see how that kind of affects my in the hand. You can feel a slight roughness to it, but it's not getting in my way. It's not catching on my hands or anything. You can just feel it's there. In many respects, that might actually help to find the center point of the device for grip, but we'll see. Honestly, it's just a little affectation really, isn't it? It's just something to say, hey, mine's a HTC. But anyway, one thing I do really like though is these tapered edges are gorgeous. The more I hold it in my hand, the more I kind of feel, wow, that is comfy. Even with that extra weight and the kind of size increase from, you know, the 4.7-inch screen, I think it was on the previous one, up to a 5-inch screen now, and it's actually grown by around 1 centimetre, top and bottom, or overall from the height, and a couple of millimetres on the width. But it feels good. It doesn't feel, this isn't kind of like holding a Note 2 or a Note 3 for the first time where you're kind of like going, oh, my hand has expanded. This feels good. And the weight and the distribution, again, feels really nice. So, the next thing we need to most definitely take a look at is we need to turn this bad boy on. It is the HTC One booting up for the first time. Now, just something to mention, because I know when we've done these deep dives in before on the first look, people say, oh, the device is taking so long to boot up. That is perfectly normal when a device is being run for the very first time out of the box. A lot of stuff has to be installed in the background, little patches and so on. Obviously, it's going to get faster the more times you boot that up and so on. So we're giving you the... Wow, that was quick. I was expecting that to take a fair old while and we'd be talking for quite some time, but wow. That was really fast. Okay, let's see what it's going to present me with when we come in. All right, so pretty standard stuff. We now need to set up our device. Already picked out United Kingdom. Let's hit start. It's asking me for my mobile network. Obviously, I need to drop my SIM card in here, and it's showing me all of the Wi-Fi networks in my area. Now, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to quickly progress through this just to save a little bit of time, really. And when I come back, we'll be sitting at the kind of next prompt. You don't really want to see me bunging in my password and everything like that. I've popped in my various Google details, syncing up my account, and the very first thing it's mentioning to me is HTC Advantage. So thank you for your purchase. Basically, I can get no charge of extra 50 gig of Google Drive storage and advanced backup. Absolutely, I think I'll have that. Who doesn't want some free stuff? Has it dropped my Wi-Fi there? I think it might have done. There we go. Let's just go back. So when you actually get the HTC One, they've done a deal with Google. So what you actually get is 50 gig of free Google Drive storage for buying the HTC One. Bonus. Although after Google dropped the price of their storage, that's probably only worth about £1 a month. So £12 a year. Still, free is free. So checking for saved backups, connecting to HTC services. What else have we got here? Use a computer to set up your email. No, I really want to skip that, thanks. Transfer and restore. Yeah, skip. Essentially what you have here is HTC have offered you a few ways that if you have a previous Android device, or I think even an iPhone or a BlackBerry, you can kind of drag all of your old data off that device and onto your new one. Now I think it uses an extra piece of software from HTC, or if you've got a previous HTC phone, it can pull the backup that it's already kept. This is useful, and we're starting to see this a lot more from manufacturers, this kind of need to really make a smooth path between devices. Certainly between Android devices is kind of essential, but also to help people migrate from iPhone, BlackBerries and so on. So let's just skip that. It's of no interest to me because I have my backups held someplace else. So we've then got all of the usual kind of syncing options available. Absolutely oodles and oodles of them. So we can now personalize and set up our screen lock if we want. We're going to skip that for now. I'm going to show you how you do all of that afterwards. Oh wow, it really does want to have lots of screens here for my startup. So setting up accounts again, it's asking what would I like to back up? Would I like to tell HTC when things go wrong and how they can improve their device automatically? Yep, certainly would. And hopefully we're now coming to our home screen. Hooray! So first off, it brings us into the Blink feed. Now, Blink feed is HTC's kind of social stream in many respects. It gathers together news and social updates from your connections. You obviously have to put those details in first into the device, and then it will give you all of that information in a feed that you can then browse through. It's kind of like Flipboards or Newsstand from Google. It's quite nice, but occasionally it can be a little bit irritating. Certainly on the HTC One we got here. Alright, so we've got our first update has already been pushed out for it. 120 meg. So stability improvements, call performance, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi firmware, fine-tune autofocus, change the video highlights, improve video photo editing. Recommend use Wi-Fi. Let's download that now while we're doing it in the background. But essentially, try installing the update manually. Great. Presumably because it's already downloading quite a lot of stuff in the background. We'll have to wait a little while and do that in a moment. Obviously, before we test any of those features, we really do need to patch up. We're using the day one patch. Make sure that we're using the latest software before we kind of explore any of this in more detail. Now, the main issue I always had with Blink feed, as it were, was it just wasn't very well executed. It was quite laggy at times. This does seem to be quite a bit faster. Nicely so, in fact. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take a quick break because there's some bits and pieces of software we need to install. I need to obviously install that day one patch as well before we kind of carry on. I wasn't aware they were going to be pushing one, but ultimately we've got a software update on day one to improve the device. Bonus. Let's do that first and then we'll move on and start really deep diving through all of these features and settings. Okay, so just whilst the HTC One M8 is installing its day one patch, let's talk about specs slightly. So first of all is the overall size. You're looking at 5.76 inches, should I say, of height, a width of 2.78 and a depth of 0.37, effectively about 4 millimeters. It's quite thin. Now, The display is a 5-inch display, up from the 4.78 I think we had on the previous edition. That's running at 1920 1080 and gives a PPI, pixels per inch, of 441, which is a slight reduction over the previous device. Effectively, same pixel density, but over a bigger display, just lowers that pixel density a small amount. It's going to be so small, you're not going to notice the difference, I wouldn't have thought. Now, they're running Sense 6.0 for the launcher, the user interface, which there's lots that can be said about Sense UI. It's not one of the worst, it's not one of the best either, but it generally does a good job. Processor-wise, this is where things get a bit more interesting. The processor is a 2.3 GHz quad-core Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 processor. In previous phones from last year, we were looking at the 800 processor, and a lot of people have commented that the 801 isn't a massive departure from the 800. I would argue slightly differently. It's not a massive architectural change necessarily, but what they have done is given speed bumps in some really key areas. The overall GPU and CPU is clocked much higher. Now that generally means that before I think we were dealing with a GPU clock of around 330 to 360, something in that kind of range for that particular GPU part. Now we're looking at well over 400, I think around 460. Now that additional clock gives around about 20 to 25% more performance for 3D work. That's a pretty big leap, guys. You know, it's not a small kind of speed bump at all, really. We'll definitely be checking out some games. We'll be comparing them to some footage from Galaxy S4 and the Nexus 5, and we'll just see how much of a difference that actual speed bump has made. So you can hear the boom sound kicking in there. Now, the rear camera uses ultra pixels. Now, strictly speaking, it gives you an image equivalent of a 4 megapixel photograph. Now, that might seem a little on the small side when we're dealing with things like 18 and 20 megapixels and so on, but the way that HTC are using those pixels is quite a bit different. An ultra pixel is a very large pixel, capable of taking in much more light than a traditional sensor can. Now, the whole idea there is the more light you can capture, the better quality of images you will generally have overall. It might not produce quite such big images, leaving you very little crop space, etc. But overall, your image should be better. Now, the issue is always with image sensor sizes and everything like that. The bigger the image, the more crop you've got, or you can shrink the image to increase the pixel density and thus giving you a sharper image. Well, effectively that's great unless you're working in low light conditions. In low light, you don't have much light coming in, and so the camera has to crank ISO and do all sorts of other ugly things to try and make a picture that's viable. HTC, with the phone from last year, the HTC One 2013, they absolutely nailed low light photography in a way that I have never seen on a smartphone before. And consequently, it was most definitely one of the standout features. What we can certainly expect here is more of the same, but with refinements. Everything they learnt from last year improved. The actual sensor appears to be exactly the same as last year's model, so let's not expect anything new and groundbreaking there necessarily, but how they kind of work in software with those images has changed. But obviously the addition of the dual shooting camera there, the additional depth sensors as it were, that is going to make a big difference on how we kind of edit our images and kind of how we can compose them after the fact. Now you can see here we're just running through the final stages of an Android upgrade, hasn't got very long to go. Now the capacity wise, we're looking at 16 and 32 gig of capacity. That is how much stuff you can store on your device. We'll take a look and just see how much roughly HTC has used up in advance. RAM is only 2 gig. Now this is going to be an interesting one. A lot of the devices we're seeing coming out this year are running with a minimum of 3 gig. HTC saved a little bit of money here, gone with just 2 gig of RAM. That might make a bit of a difference, certainly in throughput with certain games and being able to keep certain apps open in memory at the same time without Android having to put them to sleep, etc. Might be interesting, and we might see that as a slight bottleneck. Expandable storage, you can put up to 128 gig of expandable storage in this using a micro card. So, a microSD card, very, very cheap these days. Certainly being able to expand out to 128 gig is going to be fantastic. Interestingly as well, there's a 2600 milliamp hour battery in here, which is, I think, a fair old rise from the previous one, which is around a 21 or 2300 milliamp hour battery. It's going to make a fair bit of a difference. Also, HTC have got some technology that Samsung have also been rolling out in the S5, which is a ultra-low power mode. Basically, turn everything off on the device, keep the battery running as long as possible. It's going to be a few weeks before we can really understand how well that's going to work. We've got the usual assortment of features on here as well. 4G LTE, Wi-Fi, NFC, Bluetooth version 4, most important, but not the low-energy version of Bluetooth apparently. Infrared blaster is included, and then we've got our usual selection of software like the blink feed and boom sound and so on. Colour choices are going to be an interesting one. Grey, silver and rose are going to be your colours, rose gold apparently. This particular one is the silver, if you hadn't guessed. Beautiful silver looking device. I had the silver one last time and I must admit I really did fall in love with that kind of real premium feel that the metal gives you, and I personally think you should show that off. And rose gold, really? Ew. Carrier wise, well, you can expect to find this on every carrier under the sun. It'll be everywhere. This particular device came from Carphone Warehouse and it is SIM free. As you can see, the old vibration there works quite nicely. Okay, let's now dive into the device itself, start looking at the software. This is the HTC One on its home screen, and one of the first things that we can notice is if we swipe to our left side effectively, if we swipe from the left to the right, we bring up our blink feed. And this is basically our news feed, as I mentioned earlier. It rounds up data and information from a variety of different sources that we can provide it, Facebook and so on, and it creates us really a live feed of what's going on in our lives and around the world. Blink feed, it works pretty well. Certainly what we're seeing here so far feels so much more fluid and inviting than the previous blink feed. You know, colours aside, it being nice Android green, it does feel quite a bit better than the previous blink feed. Not only smoother and faster, but generally, pulling in from Google Plus now as well, which is nice. But generally speaking, it just feels quite a bit more user-friendly than the previous editions, which could at times, well, be a bit clunky, would be my feeling. So let's move on to the rest of the system. If you use the previous versions of Sense, everything here looks pretty much the same. The icons certainly don't appear to have been given a massive makeover, including the camera icon that looks very reminiscent of last year. We have all of the usual Android 4.4 features here. This is KitKat, remember. So things like the transparent bars up at the top and the way some of our settings work and so on. Everything there is Android 4.4. Down here we have our dock, and this is where we can get hold of all of our apps, which Google has very helpfully pre-installed, even the stuff I didn't want it to, which is handy. It's taken everything from my Nexus 5 and dropped it across. Useful in some respects, but not necessarily when we're trying to do a first test on a device, but never mind. So that takes us into our home area, into our dock, and from there we've got various features that allow us to kind of rearrange these apps, show and hide apps as well, change our grid size and manage them. Manage apps allows us to remove apps that we've downloaded, as well as seeing how much space we've got. And this is actually the 16 gig model that we've got here. We can also see what's on a SD card, which is a bit of a misnomer because actually the SD card is internal storage in this particular scenario with the way Android works at the moment. So we can see there that I've used up about 7.65 gig. It's still installing stuff in the background. I've got about half the space left over, but actually I think this device is probably going to be about 6 gig. I'll have to give it a wipe later and just get the final free space at install count for you. But you can even see somehow I've actually managed to get Flappy Bird on here as well. Miracle. But anyway, so let's move on. When we actually look at our home screens, we there we go, there's our widgets. So you can pinch anywhere to bring up your widgets and adjust your home screens, add new panels, etc. Works very nicely. It's really nice and fluid, very similar to the Galaxy S4 and pretty much any other Android launch you've ever used. We've got the weather widget up at the top, which is well and truly loved by all. Well, pretty much everybody. But anyway, let's move on now and take a look around the rest of the system. One of the key areas to always take a look at is our settings area. So when we actually come into here, this is our notification tray, and this is where all of our notifications live, sometimes known as the notification shade by some. And what we have here is we can dismiss using that icon, or if we click on this one, it brings up our kind of quick launch options here for brightness controls, turning your Bluetooth and Wi-Fi on and off. Here's our extreme power mode option. We'll have a play with that in a bit. Turning mobile data, do not disturb, and a few other bits and bobs in there as well. But actually what we want is we want to go into our settings. So if you've ever used a HTC device before, hey, welcome to HTC's way of doing settings. It tends to be a great big long list and then you have to go through them. Again, we have some of our kind of quick settings here which are more expandable or quick and easy to access. So we tap on the airplane mode, it will turn our any of our Wi-Fi signal, 3G or 4G signals off. If we tap on Wi-Fi, we can go in and pick from all of the different Wi-Fi networks. Bluetooth will allow us to turn Bluetooth on and set up our Bluetooth devices. Mobile data, pretty obvious one, turns our mobile data on and off, but also in there you have your ability to set your roaming information, access points, your network mode, and so on. All of those very important. If you happen to have a SIM card you're just dropping in, you need your APN settings, you will find them all in there to change. Your media output. Now in previous editions, this is effectively like a Miracast kind of thing. It allows you to stream data from your device, videos, pictures, music, to a receiver. And usually these are DLNA based receivers, Digital Living Network Alliance, for those that like acronyms. If we go into more, this is where we have yet more features related to the memory usage, etc. I noticed that it's saying HTC Mini Plus in here, which is quite interesting. That's obviously for a completely different device. Presumably that's something that's left over from interesting. We'll look into that in more detail, but I've noticed that dotted around the interface in a few places, making these references to the HTC Mini Plus. Honestly, I haven't seen what that's exactly about. I assume it's a device, but very strange. If you happen to know what this information here is, the HTC Mini Plus, do let me know. Could be a fitness band maybe, or maybe it's a leftover piece of another phone that they haven't quite removed yet. Our VPN settings, if you're a network-based kind of person wanting to connect to corporate networks. Mobile network sharing, this is your tethering basically. So Wi-Fi hotspot, USB or Bluetooth tethers, very useful. Glad we're still seeing that in there and it hasn't been forcibly removed by the networks. You can, with Android 4.4, this is a 4.4 feature, change who or what your default SMS app is going to be. Very, very useful for those people that like to use things, don't really like the built-in SMS app or want to use Hangouts, for instance. You can use that and just change it in there. And here's your NFC toggle as well, which is a little bit buried. I would prefer to have seen it kind of more central here rather than just being buried away there. I'm someone who likes turning NFC on and off when I actually need it rather than leaving it running in the background. Personalization. Here is where we get to change the look and feel of our lovely new device. We've got our home screen, our wallpapers, apps and widgets, the lock screen, a theme, ringtones, notification LEDs, everything in there. Also notification sound, should I say, which is Lotus. Let's have a listen to some of these. I think these are very much similar to ones we've had previously from HTC. Nothing particularly new there, I don't think. Let's just leave it on Willow. So in here we can make adjustments to, well, so far in home screen, just blink feed, no other option. And apparently it just throws us straight back out. I think that's probably where our launchers will get collected up. So if you have a few launchers, you'll be able to switch between them. That's another piece of, I think it's Android 4.4, but it might have been in a previous edition, actually 4.22. Can't quite remember, or maybe in 4.3. So other things in personalization, changing your wallpaper. Wow, there's a fair few different options there. So HTC's built-in wallpapers, your live wallpapers, gallery, computer photos, and Astro File Manager. Astro File Manager is appearing there because I have just installed that in the background. Apps and widgets actually brings us back to our pinch contextuality there. So effectively just keeping that functionality exactly the same. In some respects, I actually prefer that to the way Samsung do it, where you kind of end up having 2 or 3 different metaphors for doing exactly the same action. HTC there just saying to people, well, actually guys, you can just use a pinch to zoom there and just dropping people straight into it. I quite like that actually. Your home screen pages, again, that's bringing, we've seen this kind of functionality before. This is very standard way of altering home screens, adding new panels, moving things around, etc. It does mean I have to keep coming back into here. The theme is reasonable. Let's change that and let's just see if it makes any major changes to our icons. No, it's pretty much just a wallpaper really. Oh, but it's also updated this to a purple, taking on a kind of hue from here. So it's effectively skinning bits of HTC's system, as it were, but it's not making major changes to the icons. Bit of a shame. It would have been nice if they kind of embraced that a little bit more, maybe. Yeah, it's changed these up to purple as well. That's kind of cool, but I think we're a little bit reliant there on HTC to provide these new themes and colorways, as opposed to having that flexibility built in natively. That would be lovely. Maybe we'll see that for a future update. Accounts and sync, this is pretty standard stuff. If you've ever used an Android device, this is where you will find your syncing settings, and this is where you can turn your auto sync on, add new accounts, etc., picking from a wide variety of different things. Some of these will already be installed purely because the apps have installed in the background from Google. Others will be built in by default. Apologies, I can't quite tell you which ones are which at this point. Google obviously and HTC are definite. Anything else in there may very well be because of my background installs that have kicked in. Worst luck. We then have location. Now, this is obviously an important one from a battery saving point of view. If you're concerned about your battery life at all, then you may very well want to come in and make some changes on this. You can see its mode is battery saving by default. You might want just device only, or you might want a higher accuracy. Bearing in mind, these options drain your battery. You really do want to kind of keep one eye on that and just make sure if you are losing quite a lot of battery life, it could well be something in here that's querying your location quite a lot. Either go and pop it on low battery or disable that particular app from using the GPS and your location information. Now, security is always an area people are very, very interested in. Everything here is going to be pretty much the standard kind of affair. We have your long list of options. They're getting longer every year, it seems. But effectively in here we have screen lock, which gives us a few different options. You've got no screen lock, face unlock, which is standard stuff these days. It will look at your face, and if it sees it's you, it will let you in. A pattern, you draw a pattern on the screen, pattern matches, you're let in. Pin, enter a pin number just like your bank card. And a password lock, as it might sound, enter a password and it will let you in. Enable lock screen widgets. This is a feature from Android 4.3 if memory serves. This allows any of your widgets to also live on your lock screen. So without you having to actually go in and unlock your device, you can access information. Be aware from a security point of view, if you have things like Gmail or your SMS messages or even your camera as a widget on your lock screen, you are leaving yourself open to a potential security issue. You have kid mode. This has become very popular with a lot of the main manufacturers now. The idea there is that you can set up your device with a cut down series of apps that only your kids can use, and other options, for instance, like locking out in-app purchases and so on. These work in combination with some of Google's newer features within the Play Store. We then have notification settings, so which notifications will appear on the lock screen. It's a little bit limited. As you can see, it very much is only base functionality of the smartphone device. This is pretty normal though, I'm afraid. So you can have your emails, your calendar and so on. Again, mind your security with things like this. So, unlock for music automatically. You can bypass the security screen when launching music. Yeesh. Let's hope it only lets you into the music app, and there's not some way you can then trick it to go straight into the actual desktop itself. We'll check for that. Incoming phone calls, very, very useful. So hide private contact names and photos on the security lock. So if you get a call coming in, it won't display that information. It will just say there's a call coming in. Very handy. Make your passwords visible. No. Effectively, that means that when you're typing a password in on the system, it will show you the characters you've been typing in. Personally, never, ever, ever allow that on any device, ever, anywhere. Essentially, it's much better to find that you've accidentally put in the wrong password and be asked to put it in again than run the risk of somebody being able to see exactly what you've keyed in. More important than ever when we're starting to use smartphones now as authenticating devices. So if you want to access your Gmail account, for instance, you can have Google send a token or a text message down to your smartphone that allows you to authenticate. You can imagine that if you've got that password visible there, you're adding a little security risk in for yourself. Just a tip from me, basically. Device administrators, this allows you to really set third parties, maybe it's your boss's IT guy or whoever, to administer the device remotely. And this also ties into things like Google's Android device administrating system, which allows you to find your phone remotely, as well as lock it, wipe it, and so on. Unknown sources, this is used, again, this can be a big security issue. It's very much a kind of power user option. If there is an app you want to install that isn't on the Google market, Google Play market, and you kind of want to get it onto your phone, you can sideload using this. And that basically means you drop the app onto your device and then you install it manually. We'll go through that in more detail in a video later in the week. But that's one of those options which is there for power users. It is not something I would recommend for 99.99% of people. Leave that unchecked. Verifying apps, really important. You do want to leave this on. What it will do is it will double check against Google's database of bad apps that might have viruses or malware or be stealing personal information. If it sees a match against that app, it won't let you install it. It's kind of like an Uber firewall for your phone, effectively, for your apps. And again, if you have unknown sources turned on but you do have that ticked, it will double check anyway to see if there's a problem with the app. So it can be quite useful. There's an extra safety net there. Notification access. Apps cannot read notifications. You can turn those things on if you want, and that means that if you have notifications there, apps can query that for doing additional things, basically. Your storage type is, this is basically your credentials. So this is useful for corporates and government installations that need to know that this is a trusted device with security on board, etc. And that's really giving you that. It's really something that for most people is going to be of no use whatsoever, but it's really there it's for those corporates, those people trying to transition away from BlackBerry. And you can also set up your SIM card lock in here as well. Why you would want to in this day and age is beyond me, but you've got that option there. Now let's move on to the next area. Okay, so next up is accessibility. Now this is always quite important for a wide range of people because not everybody is 100% able-bodied, and so we need smartphones that can kind of tune themselves a little bit more to what we as individuals are actually capable of. And so we have some of these features here. The talkback will allow you to get a auditory cue from the system to help blind and low vision users. So it will describe what you've touched and selected and activated. This is the first time I've really seen this on a smartphone, and we're going to be testing it out, and I think this is just a great little feature. Accessibility is something I believe in, 100%, and to date, technology has amazing abilities, but it still keeps leaving people behind. This is an opportunity to kind of address that a little bit. You can change your font size, a really important thing, captions in video, magnification, power buttons when calls, making it easier for people to actually manipulate the phone without having to kind of reach around and so on, which might not work for their particular disability. Auto rotation, speaking passwords, mind that from a security point of view, and so on. You've also got the text-to-speech output here, which you can actually change what voice is going to be used, what speed rates, and so on. And all of this is working so that, you've got United Kingdom there, but if you're from a different country, it may come as default on a different language, etc. But that's where you can change everything in there. Speech rate is probably one of the most important aspects if you're going to be using that functionality. It doesn't need to be garbled. If it's too quick, you're not going to be able to understand it, but likewise, if it's too slow, then it actually becomes like a just drawn out noise. So again, that is where those functions are. Do have a play with them. I know a lot of people who don't have disabilities that still find these features really useful in aiding them in using their smartphone, making things just a little bit quicker, so something worth exploring. Your backup and reset, this is your standard stuff from every Android device we've ever seen, with an extra twist that we've got the HTC backup option in there. Now, what this really means for us more than anything else is this is where we can either back up our smartphone to the cloud, we can download our backup history if we need to, I believe, in there, once we've got some, but more importantly, this is where we can reset all of the data on the device as well. So if you're passing the device on to somebody else and you need to blank it, you can reset your phone in here and everything will be wiped back to factory. They'll have to pop in their details again. We've got an option there to get content from another phone. This is part of this kind of transition and migration process that a lot of smartphones are now using. It allows you to bring your data from BlackBerries, Samsungs, iPhones, etc. onto your new device. Displays and gestures. This is going to be an interesting one we're going to have to go through in a bit more detail. But what they've done here is kind of rounded up some of the features that would normally appear in displays, and then we've got this gestures option as well. So what we have here is we've got our font controls, our screen brightness, how long the timeout will last. Daydream. I've never used Daydream yet on any Android device. It feels like it was something they added and it's just never turned into anything useful. But essentially what that allows you to do is when it's docked, it's idle, it'll show pictures on the screen like a photo frame. Woo. Just never felt that important to me. It certainly isn't a standout feature of anything in Android. Your notification light, you can change how that's going to be operating and what things it's going to be working with. As it stands, it's a pretty slimmed down list. You may want to get an app called Lightflow, which will allow you to kind of tweak those to how you would like. And we've also got our motion sensing, motion launch gestures in here. Now we're going to be going through this in more detail, but essentially it allows you, when the device is off, without you having to actually go into the lock screen and everything like that, to double tap on the screen and swipe and then have actions performed for you. So double tapping, pick up the phone in portrait orientation and double tap to wake. Instead of me having to actually press a button, I can just double tap. We'll show you how all of that works later on after we've gone through all of this. But you can see there's a fair few different options in there that we can be making use of. We've also got the gyro sensor calibration in there, if you actually need it. Very rare you do. Then we also have sound, calls, apps, storage, and so on. Let's just have a quick flick through some of these. Sound, it's going to be pretty much the muchness if you've ever used an Android device before. Pocket mode is useful. If it detects it's in your pocket, it will ring louder. Brilliant, especially when you've got such huge speakers. We can go in here and we've got lots of things we can touch. How nice is it to see they disabled that by default? Samsung could learn a thing or two from that. One of the most annoying things with Samsung devices when we reset them is having the touch sounds constantly going blip, 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 blip until we turn them off. HTC decided they weren't going to annoy anybody straight out of the box. Leave that one for people to turn on their own. I thank you, HTC, for that one small mercy. You've got various options there to turn off your vibrate on touch, pull to refresh sounds, etc. It's all there for you to customize. How calls are going to be handled actually is greyed out at the moment. I've got no SIM in there. We'll go back and we'll take a look at that at another time. Apps, we've seen this before. This is where all of our apps are being stored, and effectively we can go in and uninstall them, manipulate them however we want to. So for instance, if I want to come into here, I've then got the ability to uninstall the app, disable the app, force it into GPU rendering if you really need to, and you can see how much space it's using up as well. Another option there is clearing the cache if you need to, something useful if you have a particularly troublesome app that's crashing a lot. Storage, this really should be very similar to apps in many respects, but it shows you a breakdown of what is using up information, rounded up. So your apps are using 2.5 gig, music 87 meg, photos and videos 75 meg. So actually this other 5.24, this is our base operating system. So HTC are only using 5.2 gig. Now you contrast that to someone like HTC, to Samsung, who have been getting nearly 9 to 10 gig snatched from the device before you can install anything into it. This is a pretty slimmed down device from that point of view. From a software stack point of view, there's not an awful lot of software kind of bloating things out. Wonderful, really like to see things like that. Power, this is where things should get moderately interesting for us. Optimize the battery life, we can turn that on. Extreme power saving mode, we turn that on and it will give us a rundown of what that's going to do. Conserve the CPU usage, reduce screen brightness, turn off vibration feedback, turning off data connection, allowing only essential apps to run, and turning off the pedometer. Now, essentially what that does is it puts the entire device into the lowest power mode it can. It's still alive, but only just. And the idea there is to really eke out as much battery as possible. So you would drop that on at night. You don't need your device sat there cranking through even at kind of low power. You want it really to have very little power going to anything unless it actually needs that power. That's very unlikely at night. So it gives that nice halfway house between turning your device off completely and potentially missing an urgent call and actually having your device available for you. So a very useful thing, I think, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that actually plays out in increasing the battery life. Some folks have said that it's increasing battery life into the hundreds of hours mark. That's going to be a really interesting thing to see. If it's true, and if also Samsung's technology stacks up the same way, it's going to be something of a watershed moment for smartphones, really. Something we should certainly expect to see other manufacturers copy. Our language and keyboard is where we can change our keyboard, funnily enough, but also our text-to-speech input as well. And if you happen to install a third-party keyboard like Swipe in here, you can find the kind of app settings there to manipulate it if you need to. Date and time, funny enough, that allows us to set our dates and time, as well as setting up things like automatic time zone and automatic updates from the network. Useful if you happen to be roaming and you're concerned about the time zone changes, you can change that in there. And a feature that's been added of late is printing and cloud printing services. And this basically works with Google's Cloud Print so that you can print directly from your smartphone to a printer across the internet. And that printer could be on the other side of the world. For all the smartphone cares, it will just happily print to it if it's been set up in your account. So that's all of our core settings. Let's now go and take a good look at some of HTC's software they've added, things like the camera. Let's take a look at the camera now, because this is obviously a standout feature for HTC, or at least they hope it will be. Now, it's using the same ultra-pixel technology as the previous HTC One from 2013, with a major change. We now have a dual camera and dual LEDs there. Now, what we have come to expect from HTC is a very good camera with fast autofocus and a kind of feature set which feels solid. Now, the first thing I would say is the autofocus is still really, really exceptional. Obviously, the trick here is I'm quite close to the desk when I'm just doing this, but you can see it's very, very fast and responsive. Features-wise, this kind of 4 dots in a row there brings us into our kind of settings, and it's beautifully kind of laid out with big buttons so that you can quickly hit things. I like that. Compared to, say, the Galaxy S4 camera software, this feels nice. Likewise, all you have to do is touch and you can move between the various settings, including selfie, dual capture, hello camera, and panoramics. The only thing that kind of strikes me as not being very nice, listen to this. You hear that? I don't like that. That might sound like a nitpick, but it's a really kind of harsh sound. It doesn't feel like a kind of haptic feedback kind of thing. It almost feels like a light switch being turned on and off and getting that little spark. It's not particularly pleasant, I wouldn't say. That's not too bad, the kind of wood knock sound, but that short kind of, I don't like it particularly. But if all I'm grumbling about is the sound on one button, fair enough. I think I can probably live with it, but yeah, that just grates actually. But anyway, once we actually have our kind of options selected, we then can go into our settings down here, and here we have all of the options you could possibly imagine. So there's our auto, and what type of auto. We can have it on auto, we can have night shot, HDR, sweep panoramic. That's going to be a fun one to try out. Oops, let's just get back into there. We've got anti-shake. Sorry, I'm just got to get into the right setting here. Where's it gone? All right, manual. Portrait, landscape, wow, there's plenty of them. Backlit, text, or macro mode, macro obviously being for close-up work. So those are your kind of your scenes, as it were, as known by many cameras. You would use what known as scene modes. So let's pop that back onto auto for a second. And then what we also have is within each of those modes is the ability to then change camera settings. So you can have the ISO on auto, or ISO up to 1600, which is the max. ISO is how sensitive the camera is going to be to light. Now in part that kind of doesn't matter so much because we're dealing with an ultra pixel camera here. Its light sensitivity is excellent. But then we also have our exposure compensation, or exposure timings there as well, automatic white balance, or select what type of light you are dealing with. Auto white balance is always a funny one. Personally, I always find it's better to tune it for exactly what you're looking for, or what you're looking at, should I say. You've then got the obligatory filters. Yeah, it wouldn't be a smartphone camera in 2013 or 14 which doesn't have filters in it. So there we have a wide range of different filters, and these will be real-time filters as well. So it will actually adjust this in real time to give you different kind of views and looks, which is quite nice. I liked this in the previous version of the HTC One. It was quite nice just to quickly throw on an effect and see how it would change the scene. We can also then go into this cog should I say, and you've then got even more options. Continuous shooting, what will actually be used to trigger the camera, trigger a picture to be taken, image adjustments, the crops, the grid, you can have the grid on, geotag all your photos, and how long the review duration will be. It's a wide range of different features, let's put it that way. And I would say certainly comparable to Samsung stuff, but maybe not quite as fully featured in some respects. But ultimately, the dual camera option is going to be the big decider here. If you're able to then manipulate and recompose your images after you've taken them, it's going to be a major plus point. So it'll be really interesting to kind of see feature-wise how this kind of stacks up to the Samsung Galaxy S5 as well from its features point of view. But certainly what I've seen here, the speed of the camera, the way the functionality has been laid out, it's really nicely done. Far, far better than that kind of horrible mess we had on the Galaxy S4 where, frankly, it was just clunky and taking pictures wasn't particularly fun if you had to go in and make any changes to the settings. It seems here that HTC have done a good job at rethinking how to lay out all of that, at times, quite complex set of settings without cluttering the screen or giving you really small targets to try and hit with your fingers. I really like this, and certainly I think that we'll give this a good test run, taking different images and video, and we'll report back on what we see. It's difficult during these kind of first looks to get much more than a fairly surface view of how this is going to work in practice, but let's see. Next up, games. Okay, so here we are with Ridge Racer. This is one of the latest racing games to be released on Android, so it proves a really good kind of test throwing the latest games at it. We're also going to take a look at Dead Trigger 2. We'll just give a little bit of footage of this, really, just to kind of get a feel for how it's going to work. Let's also pop our audio up a little bit so we can get a sense for the boom sound as well. Let's see how this plays. Now, on the Nexus 5, when I've played this game, I found it to be pretty good, but can have some frame rate issues going into corners and on some of the tracks. So let's just see what we get here. Possibly should have actually gone for a slide there rather than trying to turn the corner normally. But certainly there's not a lot to grumble about here, I wouldn't say. Yeah, that does feel a little bit more fluid and responsive. What you found is that sometimes when you come in and actually try and put a drift on, you get a little bit of kind of frame rate lag, but that is actually substantially better, I would say. A little bit glitching there as the fill rate spins round, or should I say as the car rights itself. Again, that is feeling pretty good actually. I wouldn't say it's perfect though. You can see when those smoke trails come out the back of the car from the tyre burn, that actually it does lag a little bit with those. But I would say that is certainly an improvement over the Nexus 5, but not by much. It's marginal, I would say. Obviously I'm going to have to play a lot more games to get a really good feel for it, but yeah, I would say that is definitely an improvement over the Nexus 5, but it's only marginal, only marginal. Right, let's have a look at Dead Trigger 2, shall we? Something with a bit more of a first-person shooter action going on, and obviously very high detailed textures. It tends to make quite a good test for any device. Let's switch over and have a look at that. This is Dead Trigger 2, and we're really looking just to see how this game actually looks and plays, and oh my god, that is laggy. What on earth is going on there? I mean, it looks beautiful, I'm not kidding you, it's got all of the kind of shiny goodness we really like to see, but it doesn't feel particularly fluid. That's strange. A little bit better now actually. May very well have just been some texture caching going on, but if you watch this, that doesn't feel quite as robust as I think we've seen on other devices. That's interesting. I wonder whether, bearing in mind that this is a very similar GPU CPU combination as we had in the S4 and the Nexus 5, but only clocked higher, we should, in theory, have better frame rates. So it's a bit of a strange one, that. Might be it requires a little bit of patching from the developer, but to be honest with you, that's actually feeling quite a little bit better now anyway. Could very well just have been some initial starting issues while it was... yeah, that's not too bad now, actually. It feels quite fluid. It's not perfect, though. Not perfect, which is very strange. We're going to have to investigate this one in more detail and just see whether it's a device issue, whether it's an Android issue, or whether it's a game-related issue. But whilst it's smooth enough now, it just doesn't quite feel like it has the zing going on with the frame rate and the responsiveness that I kind of have seen on the Nexus 5 and felt was perfection. Interesting. So one of the things I've noticed as I've been kind of browsing around the device, having a kind of first look, is how little software HTC have kind of bloated this device out with. A lot of my apps have installed in the background from my previous device. Thanks Google, which can be useful but also a pain when you're trying to kind of get a feel for a device for the first time. But HTC have put very little here in the way of kind of bloated out software. It's quite interesting. Other than their Blink feed, which is kind of an integral part of the Sense 6 UI, what we have really is all of Google's apps that we've come to know and love, so Chrome, Gmail, Google+, Maps, Music, and so on, through to Drive, YouTube, and Photos and Hangouts. But software-wise, when we actually look in here, ignore all of my apps that have unfortunately been installed, but really there's very little here from HTC other than this tool set. So calculator, a flashlight, weather, downloads, HTC apps, parent dashboard, voice recorder, HTC backup and the setup routine. Things that we've seen on previous HTC devices and doesn't really appear to have changed that much. The only other thing really is the Zoe app, which unfortunately at the moment doesn't work until around the summertime. And that's kind of it. It's very slimmed down, which in many respects I really respect. There's not a huge amount here. I've noticed that obviously there's the Fitbit option and kid mode, but some of these things like the kid mode, we've seen this before and it ties in as you know, we've seen on previous HTC devices, into the device that allows your kids just to use the apps you kind of want. We also have the car mode, the TV mode app there as well. The TV mode app is really useful. It uses the infrared blaster and it effectively allows you to control your television and your audio hi-fi equipment directly from your smartphone. I used this last year on the HTC One 2013 and it was fantastic. It actually worked, in my opinion, better than the Samsung device, even though I think they were using the same company to actually provide the software for it. The other options there we have is media, and this kind of rounds up a few of the googly apps, as well as obviously HTC's own stuff. We have the camera app in there, which is HTC's music app, HTC's FM radio, 7 Digital, don't know why, that came with HTC stuff last year, it wasn't very good. And then obviously just the googly stuff like Newsstand, Movies and TV and Photos, as well as the Play Music app in there as well. We've also got stocks, the HTC guide, which gives you information about how HTC kind of work. And that's really it. There's not a lot here. Like I say, productivity again, we've got Scribble in there, Polaris Office and the phone and tasks option. But these are all kind of, well, feels to me more like reskins of existing apps than kind of a massive departure. And it's always a bit of a strange thing when you're dealing with companies building on top of Android, because Google obviously expects its devices to be carried there as standard. You're then kind of duplicating effort with the manufacturer, then producing its own versions of the apps that don't tie into Google services as such. Always a slightly confusing thing. Like I say, this is the Zoe app, and this is really a kind of photo sharing app, which works with the Zoe software, as it were, on the phone, although I think the idea is it now moves to a cloud-based system. And the idea there is to be able to share your photos online and so on. But unfortunately, it's not on the device as standard, and it won't be launching apparently it won't be launching apparently until around June time, which is a bit of a shame. It would have been nice if they'd had this available for launch so we could check it out, but for now it's a curiosity. So don't expect that particular app to do much of anything until June, I'm afraid. So software-wise, as I say, there's not a huge amount here to kind of crow about from HTC's point of view, but actually that in itself is something to crow about, because normally we expect these devices to come chock full of software. Most of the time we are never going to use, and most of the time it doesn't work very well if we do try and use it. So it's nice to see HTC simply saying, well look, we kind of have to service a certain set of users who don't want the Google apps, so we'll put those in. And then it's a case of, well okay, there's certain features that we kind of need because they're kind of important to make our phone work, like a camera app, etc., that is designed to work with the new hardware features. But overall here, it's very slim, and I like that. I like the option to choose what I want to install from which particular app developer, as opposed to kind of feeling, oh great, I've got this translation app built in, I'm not even going to use it. And more importantly, if I did want to use it, a translation, I wouldn't use that app anyway. I'd want to pick something myself. So it's really nice to have a cut down software suite here. Really nice, in fact. In many respects, it feels like HTC listened to the market and gave us what we were asking for: choice. So we've now gone through pretty much every aspect of the HTC One M8 that you could possibly imagine. The question is, how will this stack up over the next week or so, and how will these features kind of expand to be things that we really kind of want to crow about, or potentially say, HTC need to try better next time. Over this next couple of weeks, we're going to be putting the HTC One through its full paces. We're going to literally tear it apart feature-wise, see what it's capable of, where its downsides are, and so on. So do please subscribe if you want to see more from the HTC One. If you want an opportunity to be able to say to us, hey, go and check out this particular feature, show us how it works in this scenario. Now is your opportunity. Let us know in the comments what you would like us to test next. If there's something we've missed and failed to show you with the HTC One M8, do let us know in the comments and we'll make sure it goes into a future video. If there's games you want us to try out, or apps, or a scenario, just let us know in the comments and we'll do our best to accommodate you. Do subscribe. There will be more videos coming up over this next week, but to begin with, that is our HTC One M8, and I am very impressed with what HTC have delivered here. It's a beautiful feeling device in the hand. It has a wonderful in the hand feel. It is heavier than the previous device, and certainly heavier than any of Samsung's devices, but that actually gives it a really nice premium feel. The actual metal that's being used and the general feel of it, that curve is just gorgeous. And as you can see, it's one of the most striking screens that I think we've seen so far. It has a slightly smaller or lower PPI than the previous HTC One, but it is gaining additional real estate for the screen at 5 inches. Overall, from what I've seen so far, HTC may very well get their wish of being the phone of the year again. It's hard to see what Samsung with the Galaxy S5 can really do to compete when we're dealing with very similar hardware, but ultimately this feels premium and it feels like it's worth the money we're paying for it. It's going to be very interesting to see how the other manufacturers respond now, because I think HTC, they might have nailed it again. For watching, we hope you enjoyed this video. Do please remember to like and comment, and if you'd like to, please subscribe. You can also visit our website and download our Android app. If you do subscribe, you'll be getting a daily dose of the latest tech news, hardware reviews, Android games, consoles, and basically an honest opinion direct from the UK. Stay tuned, stay Androidizen.